My name is Maya Reyes, and on the happiest day of my life, my mother-in-law stood up with a microphone in her hand and told 300 guests that I would never be enough for her son.
This marriage is a complete fraud.
She didn't know my father was already walking through the door behind her, holding the one piece of paper that would end her family's 50-year lie. Before I tell you what was on that paper, hit like and subscribe if you believe karma sometimes needs a little help finding the address. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. Now, let me take you back to 6 months before that wedding, when I still thought Diane Ashford simply didn't like me. I was 29 years old, standing in the marble foyer of Ashford Hall, a rented event estate an hour outside Boston, running my fingers along a wooden banister that had been polished so many times it looked like glass. I'd found this venue myself 6 months earlier through my job. I worked in historic property acquisitions, which is a fancy way of saying I found beautiful old buildings that had fallen into disrepair and helped investors bring them back to life. Ashford Hall had been exactly that kind of project, a crumbling 19th century estate seized in a bankruptcy auction 12 years earlier, restored slowly by a private buyer who wanted nothing to do with its history. I'd walked those grounds a dozen times for work before I ever thought to book it for my own wedding. I didn't tell David's family where the reception would be held until 3 weeks before the date. I wanted it to be a surprise. I had no idea how much of a surprise it would actually turn out to be. Backstory. David and I had been together 4 years by the time we got engaged, and in those 4 years, his mother Diane had perfected the art of the compliment that wasn't one. "You're so practical," she told me the first time we met, looking at my off-the-rack dress like it had personally offended her. David always needed someone grounded. At Thanksgiving, my first year, she introduced me to her sister as David's girlfriend, the one who does something with old houses, as though my career, 6 years of it, 3 promotions, a title, couldn't be named directly. When David proposed, Diane's first words on the phone weren't congratulations. They were, "Well, I suppose you'll want a small wedding given your budget." The truth was, I made more money than David did. I'd built my entire adult life around the quiet, patient work of restoring value nobody else could see, and I found deep satisfaction in it. But the Ashfords had a particular kind of old money pride, the kind that comes from having lost most of it. David's grandfather had built a shipping fortune. His father had gambled a chunk of it away on bad investments in the early 2000s. And the crown jewel of that fortune, a lake estate called Ashford Hall, the very same one, had been seized and sold at auction when David was 17. Diane never spoke about it directly. She spoke about the years we don't discuss and before things changed, like the house had simply evaporated rather than been taken from them because of decisions her husband made. I didn't put it together until I was standing in that foyer with my wedding planner, going over floor plans, and she mentioned offhand that the estate used to be called something else, Ashford Hall, before the current owner renamed it. My stomach dropped. I called my father that night, my hands shaking, and asked him a question I already knew the answer to. My father, Robert Reyes, had spent 30 years building a construction and restoration company from nothing, the kind of company that gets called in when a beautiful old building is one bad winter away from being condemned. 6 years ago, before I'd even met David, my father's company had been the private buyer who purchased Ashford Hall at auction. He'd restored it as a long-term investment, the kind he does quietly, the kind he never talks about at dinner because to him it's just work. He didn't recognize the Ashford name when I mentioned my in-laws because I'd never once mentioned Diane's maiden name, and by marriage, David went by Ashford, but the estate's public records still listed the property under its original name, which my father's company had simply kept for historical accuracy on the plaques. I asked my father not to say anything. Not yet. Some petty, quiet part of me wanted to watch Diane walk through those doors on my wedding day without knowing that the home she'd built her entire identity around not having belonged, indirectly, to my family now. The wedding day arrived in early June. 300 guests, string quartet on the lawn, my mother crying happy tears in the front row, David's face when I walked down the aisle, the way his whole body seemed to exhale. It was, up until the reception, the best day of my life. Diane took the microphone during toasts. She'd had 2 glasses of champagne and the kind of confidence that comes from decades of never being told no. She started sweetly enough, a story about David as a boy, and then her voice shifted, the way it always did, into something with teeth. She said, "I'll be honest," smiling out at the crowd like she was doing everyone a favor, "when David first brought Maya home, I worried. She works with old houses, which is a lovely little job, but David comes from a certain kind of family, a certain standard, and I've watched for 4 years waiting for her to rise to it. I love my son too much to pretend she has." She raised her glass. "She'll never quite be enough for him, but we love her anyway." 300 people went silent. My mother's hand found mine under the table. David's jaw tightened so hard I could see it from across the room. But before he could stand, before I could even process the humiliation crawling up my neck, the ballroom doors opened. My father walked in. He wasn't supposed to arrive until the dessert course. He'd been finishing paperwork at his office, the same paperwork I'd asked him to bring, the paperwork we'd planned to reveal privately, quietly, after the wedding. Not like this. But Diane's toast had changed the timeline. He walked straight to the microphone stand, still in his gray suit, holding a leather folder, and he didn't ask permission. My father has never once in his life needed permission to speak. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, and the room, still frozen from Diane's toast, turned to him instead. "I'm Robert Reyes, Maya's father. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but I think this needs saying now instead of later." He opened the folder. 6 years ago, my company purchased a property at auction, a beautiful estate that had fallen into serious disrepair after its owners lost it in bankruptcy. We restored it. We've hosted maybe a dozen events here since. Tonight is one of them. He paused, and I watched Diane's face, still flushed with champagne and self-satisfaction, slowly begin to change. This property's original name, before we renamed the venue for business purposes, was Ashford Hall. The color drained out of Diane so fast, I thought she might actually faint. David's father, seated beside her, went rigid. My father continued, calm, unhurried, the way he always is when he's about to close a deal. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone. Families lose things. It happens. What I am here to say is this." He looked directly at Diane. "My daughter didn't marry into your family tonight because she needed your name or your money or your approval. She built her own career finding value in things other people had already given up on, including, as it happens, this house. So when you stand up and tell 300 people she'll never be enough, I'd ask you to consider what enough actually means. In a room she quite literally helped restore." Diane sat down, without a word. It was the first time in 4 years I had ever seen her without a response ready. The rest of the reception happened in a strange, charged quiet. Guests didn't know where to look. David found me by the dessert table 20 minutes later, his hand shaking slightly as he took mine. I didn't know about the house, about any of it. I believed him. David had spent his whole life absorbing his mother's quiet cruelty as just how things were, never quite naming it, never quite standing against it, because it was easier to love her carefully than to confront her directly. "I need you to actually see her, David, not just love her. See her, because I've spent 4 years being told I wasn't enough by a woman standing in a house my family owns, and I need to know you're not going to spend the next 40 years asking me to be smaller so she feels bigger." He didn't have an answer that night, but 3 days later, back from our honeymoon, he did. David called his mother and asked her to meet him alone for lunch. He told me about it afterward, and I could tell it had cost him something to do it. He told her that the toast had been the cruelest thing he'd ever watched her do, that he'd spent his whole childhood making himself smaller so she wouldn't feel the loss of the house, the money, the life she thought she was owed, and that he wasn't willing to watch her do the same thing to his wife. Diane cried, he said. Real tears this time, not the practiced kind. She told him she didn't know how to be around a house that used to be hers without feeling like the version of herself who lost it, and the anger she aimed at me was never really about me at all. It didn't fix everything overnight. Diane and I are not close, not the way I once hoped we might be. But she came to our first anniversary dinner. She brought a gift, wrapped badly, the kind of badly wrapped gift that tells you someone tried without knowing quite how. Inside was an old photograph of Ashford Hall before the bankruptcy, David as a small boy on the front steps. "I thought you should have this," she said, not quite meeting my eyes, "since you're the one who kept it standing." It wasn't an apology, but it was the first true thing she'd ever said to me. I think about that night often, not the humiliation of it, but the strange grace of watching someone's whole carefully built story collapse in real time and choosing not to build my own cruelty out of the rubble. My father taught me that the most powerful thing you can do to someone who's tried to make you feel small is refuse to make them feel smaller back. You just tell the truth, calmly, and let the room decide what it means. Has someone ever tried to define your worth using a house, a job, or a bank account that wasn't really theirs to judge? Tell me about it in the comments. I read everyone, and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear this week. If this one hit home, share it with someone who's still waiting for their own version of that leather folder to walk through the door. Until next time, remember, the truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be said. This is Maya, reminding you that the house always remembers who rebuilt it.